Welcome back. This is the 5th video in my series on the basics of the music business, and this time we're going to look at royalties and revenue. I will show you how to understand a performing royalty statement from your PRO, your Copyright Society, as well as the digital distribution statements that you would get from your aggregator. We'll also take a look at Spotify and YouTube, but from a different point of view. And, as always, there'll be the usual useful links. To begin with, however, let's start with a legal definition of what royalties actually are. The word royalty gets used an awful lot these days, sometimes correctly, sometimes not, so it's important to understand exactly what is meant by the term. The legal definition is that it is compensation for the use of intellectual property, usually in the form of copyrighted works or patented inventions, expressed as a percentage of the receipts for any such use. Record labels sometimes refer to the payment of royalties to an artist. This simply means a payment for the use of the artist's performance on a recorded work owned by the record label. Technically, still a royalty under the legal definition, but it does not really imply the use of any intellectual property as such. Composers earn royalties from the exploitation of their intellectual property, their songs, by the publisher. Intellectual property is defined as the product of human intelligence, and the right of ownership of the creation of such products must be established, moral right, before those rights can be exploited, copyright. The result of that exploitation will usually be shown in a royalty statement, as we saw in the last lesson. So let's take a look at it again, this time in more detail. Royalty statements are supplied by your Copyright Society, usually on a quarterly or 6-monthly, maybe even a yearly basis. And as you can see, they contain quite a lot of detail. So it kind of makes sense now to take a look at this in detail and see exactly what's what. Understanding the royalty statement. So let's look at an individual section for one particular song. We start with the work's title and the International Standard Work Code. This code is the musical equivalent of the ISBN number that you find in book publishing. This is followed by the broadcast region or territory, and along with that, the broadcast date or the period of broadcast. Up next is the title of the program in which the work was used and the duration of that use. And this is followed by the number of repeats, or the number of times that particular program was broadcast. Major international channels like Discovery or National Geographic have agreements in place with PROs, performing rights organisations such as PRS in the UK, to cover simultaneous broadcasts in multiple territories. The statement also shows the various IP owners. In this case, there are 2 composers and 1 publisher. You may have spotted that both Charlie and I have 2 different name forms. This is simply because we both have stage names, and sometimes we register work under our stage name and sometimes under our legal name. If you do use a stage name, it's important, when joining a copyright society, to mention this. This way, your royalty statements can be linked together and you'll still get paid as the same person. The royalty share section is individual. It refers only to the share for the person for whom this statement is intended. The broadcast region also shows the society making the collection and therefore passing payments on to PRS, who then make the distribution according to our contracts. You will notice a difference in the share split between 25% or 33%. This is because Music House themselves are responsible for making the registration of that particular work, and it is up to them to declare the percentages for each individual work. Streaming royalties. Royalties from streams and download sales are where life gets extremely complicated. The regulations for streaming payments now vary from territory to territory, and payment systems vary from portal to portal. However, let's try and make some sense of it. Rhapsody, now Napster, and some others have 2 different business models: unlimited streaming and tethered downloads. The unlimited streaming royalty highlighted here is paid as a performing royalty in the same way that it would be paid by a copyright society for a radio or TV broadcast. Users can only access content online. It is based on a variable rate depending on Napster's own monthly income and a song's popularity. This rate averages out at around 0.009 US dollar cents per stream. The tethered download royalty highlighted here is paid as a mechanical royalty in the same way that it would be paid by a copyright society for a duplication, but only outside the US. Within the US, the mechanical royalty is deducted from the payment and held until notification is received from either ASCAP or directly by the copyright owner. If the music is not registered at the time of streaming, as in this case, it is paid and specified as a mechanical royalty. Tethered downloads allow users to play content offline, and it is therefore not a performing royalty. Interactive services allow the end user to choose the music they wish to listen to, right down to a specific track. In other words, the end user can make any choice he or she wishes and fully interact with the service. Whether or not this is a mechanical royalty, a streaming royalty, or a combination of both, well, it's still a subject for discussion. Non-interactive services act in the same way as a normal radio, sometimes allowing the user to select genres or specific artists, but not to choose specific songs. There is no tethered download, and therefore no implication of ownership. Non-interactive services make streaming royalty-only payments. Confused? We all are, and the debate goes on. If a song is selected on an interactive service, a mechanical royalty is due, as this is seen as a copy or duplication. However, there is an argument to suggest that, as the download is limited to the length of time that the user pays a subscription fee, it is not a true mechanical royalty as there is no ownership, just a rental. In some cases, Spotify for example, it has been argued that a stream from the Spotify server on a free account is simply a performance, not a true duplication. It is only when the music is downloaded for access offline can it be considered to be a mechanical royalty. If a song is streamed on an interactive service, the mechanical royalty is paid by the streaming service itself directly to the local copyright society, if an agreement is in place, for the territory in which the stream occurred. If a song is streamed on a non-interactive service, the performing royalty is declared and paid by the streaming service to the local copyright society for the territory in which the stream occurred, but only if there is an agreement in place between the service and the PRO. Not all PROs have such agreements. Heads up, if your music is not registered, it may be paid directly to you from the service unless the service has a collection agreement in place for a specific territory. Quote, "During the term of the agreement, Spotify will provide us with data broken down by territory, which we will use to distribute monies received. These monies received for each quarter will be divided over all the works we have licensed, which we are able to identify as being streamed on Spotify in that period. This means that the effective rate per stream will be determined by a combination of the amount of streams and total revenue collected. The rate will vary depending on the territory, whether or not it was streamed via one of Spotify's paid or free services, and will vary from quarter to quarter. However, as a guide, a single track would need around 600 plays by users on Spotify's paid service to achieve a combined payment of £1 from PRS and MCPS. A work would need around 3,000 plays by users on Spotify's free tier to achieve the same combined payment of £1 from PRS MCPS. End quote. It is important to remember that streaming services offer the user access to music rather than ownership. Payments per stream are low, especially when compared to the sale of a CD or even a digital sale. However, when compared to a traditional access model service such as radio, the rates compare favourably. For example, quote again from PRS, "Radio, a play on BBC Radio 1 would earn a total of approximately £45. At any given time it would be heard by an estimated 1 million people. By contrast, if a track receives 1 million plays on Spotify's paid services, you can expect it to receive roughly £1,700, or £300 from Spotify's free service." Did I mention that these numbers are notoriously variable? PRS will license music to Spotify if the work is registered with PRS MCPS, the broadcast territory falls under one of the specifically negotiated territories with Spotify, i.e. the UK, Ireland, the European Economic Area and Switzerland. They will also license music if the work is not published by any of the following publishers because they have separate deals in place. These include Sony ATV, EMI, Warner Chappell, Universal, BMG Chrysalis and Cobalt. In all other cases, Spotify will pay the royalties under their own regulations unless these are superseded by other PRO agreements or by local laws concerning streaming, i.e. in the US, for example. The Spotify payment calculation. Although it is now difficult to verify whether or not this still holds true because a number of copyright societies now have separate agreements in place with Spotify, Spotify did release an overview of how they calculate the payments they make to the content owners back in 2015 on artist.spotify.com. In effect, it works like this. Take the number of tracks currently held in the Spotify catalogue and divide it by the amount of revenue generated by both advertising on the freemium service and subscription revenue from the premium service. Deduct 30% of that figure as a fee to Spotify in the form of a distribution percentage, and you end up with the plus or minus 0.004 cents per stream. There are other variables that come into play though, including the number of times a particular track is streamed, for example, which explains why the more popular artists earn more per stream than the rest of us. We should also bear in mind that Spotify has negotiated separate deals with major labels, and details of these are, as you might imagine, a closely guarded secret. YouTube. As you might expect, Google has their own way of doing things, and behind YouTube itself is a system called RightsFlow. Originally a standalone digital rights management system, RightsFlow was used by a number of portals to manage music royalty payments. The company was acquired by Google in 2011 and now works almost exclusively for YouTube and Google Play. And take note, the PRS statement on Spotify is very similar to their statement on YouTube. In fact, PRS were the first PRO to make an agreement with Google directly, the Digital License Agreement. And in a similar vein, we have Rumblefish, again originally a standalone product. Now it's part of the Harry Fox agency in the US. It's a suite of licensing and rights administration applications that can monitor, track and register IP usage across multiple platforms, i.e. not only video streaming. However, if you receive a takedown notification of your YouTube clip, it is highly likely that it was spotted as an infringement of somebody else's copyright by Rumblefish. And remember, YouTube is not the only video portal, and Rumblefish licenses content to many other platforms. So how does it work? Well, Rumblefish agrees licenses both with aggregators, like CD Baby for example, and directly with major music publishers such as EMI and Universal. Rumblefish then track any usage of the licenses they have granted on YouTube, Vimeo or whoever, and they also collect the broadcast royalties which they feed back to the aggregator, who eventually pays that back to you. So that wraps up this lesson on royalties and revenue, and as always, here are the useful links. I hope that this has now cleared up a lot of the misconceptions about who pays you, and that this lesson, in conjunction with the previous lessons, will now give you a clear indication of what your potential value really is. In the next video, we will investigate all of the various forms of distribution that are available to us these days. So again, please like and subscribe, and if you can, support us on patreon.com/Lavender Vale, because your support is valuable to us. Thanks again for listening.